Ladies and gentlemen, I have some good news. The video game Crash has been canceled. At least there seems to be a solution that's been thrown out there. And this is something that came up over the last week or so. And, I was reading through and I couldn't believe what was being described because they didn't necessarily say it. But hey, we may be back to 2020 levels with the metaverse and Fortnite. That's a combination, but that's actually what's being pitched here. And I want to take a look at that here today when it comes to AAA gaming and what the real solution is. So if you guys enjoy the video, hit the like button, subscribe if you're new. So during this presentation, Unreal Engine 5.8, big push there seems to be more optimization rather than just better visuals. Same kind of thing with Unreal Engine 6. It's more so the ease of development and being able to move the game across multiple different platforms. That's pretty important, right? Like being able to have an Unreal Engine logo come up without the person who's playing the game starting to question, oh, is this going to be a stutter fest or not? So at least they're working in the right direction there. There's, of course, controversy around AI as generative AI is becoming more and more built in to Unreal Engine, and that'll be a whole thing, I'm sure, that'll have to be figured out, especially as we go into Unreal Engine 6. But again, during this presentation, Tim Sweeney talked about AAA gaming and saying that like a tidal wave was washing over the AAA space. And I mean, he's right about that. If you look around currently with game budgets ballooning to hundreds of millions of dollars, it is like if you swing and miss, that seems to be it for your studio. I mean, at this point, many will take mild success. How many times do you hear the game has not met expectations? It's pretty consistent. So I at least understand the idea that we got to figure something out here for AAA gaming. So after talking about the tidal wave that's going, he then moved over to Roblox and other forms of entertainment that are pulling attention. And that would also be correct because, yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there now. Back when I was younger, it was, oh, you had your Super Nintendo, your N64, your PS1, and that was kind of it. Like you had the TV in the living room or something that got so many channels. And yes, yeah. But basically it was you, dark room, Final Fantasy 7, you, a dark room, Mario 64. And you just played that game. Like there was no phone next to you nagging with social media or anything. You were just pretty much locked in for the weekend. And those are good times. I'm sure people do look back on those times as just simpler, but also more welcoming. Like there's just the fond memories there of almost like just the peace around. That's the quiet. But with that, he does talk about just how loud it is and how much attention is being pulled. TikTok, Roblox, social media, whatever, right? So what do you do to combat that? Well, you join up with Epic Games and Fortnite. He says one view of the future is that Roblox grows and eats gaming. A lot of people are saying this online, but what you have there is a centralized platform with a single gatekeeper that commoditizes all content, takes more than 70% of revenue, and has 450 million users on board. So that's a real challenge to game developers. So what's the solution? He says, we're going to need to build better games. I mean, sure, you always try to build better games, but he says, we're going to need to build them more efficiently. We're going to need to design upfront and build for connected games, where all of our player bases are connected socially and our economies are connected, so that players, instead of seeing these as isolated products, see them as part of a global ecosystem that all game developers participate in together. He also talks about lowering the barrier of entry, which if you look at Fortnite, it's just free to play. And how do they make money? There's currency and microtransactions in the game. And that's basically what he's pointing out here. It's like, hey, instead of going to 70, 80, $100 games, why don't we make them like free to play and just charge on the back end for that? And like over time, he's like, the math, you can check it, the arithmetic, it works out. And in a way, he is correct for certain circumstances. Again, I would say the majority, the math doesn't work out because we see them shut down time and time again. Live service games, it seems like you have to take a swing at 10 of them before one of them hits. And who knows better right now than Sony? As a great example in this generation over the last 5 years. It's been a consistent trend. They get a Helldivers 2, but then we hear about 4 other games that have been canceled, and then one did come out with Concord and then gets pulled back in after a couple of weeks on the market. So these are things I think that are very easy to say when you have a Fortnite. It's much more difficult to say when you're trying to make a Fortnite. But he essentially says with Unreal Engine 6, Fortnite will be a platform you can release to. So think about there's a PlayStation, there's a Nintendo system, there's an Xbox, a PC, and then there's a Fortnite. And I guess the idea being like Roblox, where many different games are made and put into that ecosystem or that platform. Similar thing here for Fortnite. All right. And, it's a very optimistic view to say, oh, all these billion-dollar companies are going to be just fine sharing assets back and forth. You buy a sword in one game and you can move it over to another. It'll work fine because it's all Unreal Engine 6 and everyone will get along and be real happy that that premium sword that someone spent 20 bucks on in this game works in the game that publisher gets no money for, but it looks really cool, So that's I don't know how well that would actually work out in practice. These are things that I think look really good in like a business presentation PowerPoint, but then really break down when you actually start trying it out in the real world. And to me, this just becomes kind of an over engineering of the problem with AAA gaming. And I will say this, I don't think there's one obvious solution for fixing AAA gaming right now. When I say fixing, I mean just the struggles that we see currently, because it's pretty obvious. Games have gotten more expensive over time to make. I mean, they're more expensive than ever. So many times you'll see a game budget get mentioned in passing or in a report or something, and you're like, how did that game cost multiple hundreds of millions of dollars to make? It makes like no sense. People are thinking there's embezzlement or something happening with some of these games, but a lot of it does come down to the time and development with the amount of labor, and then of course where you make the game. That is a very, very important thing that people tend to gloss over. If you make a game in California, in Santa Monica, or other parts of the U.S. where it's very expensive to have a staff, a bunch of developers, like high talent developers, even ones that are in demand, it's going to cost a lot more than if you make it, say, in Japan, where it is just cheaper to staff an entire studio. And so these overinflated budgets mean that these companies are constantly under pressure to sell 7 or 8 million copies in order just to break even. And that's just obviously not sustainable, because the costs around games only continue to go up. When we start to hear that Call of Duty is approaching the $1 billion mark, that's insane. I mean, the thing comes out every year, and yes, they sell 15, 20, 25 million copies, but that number, I mean, is still creeping up. So it sort of makes sense why they are doing all kinds of other things beyond the $70 price tag. See, we're in this inflection point where gamers look at an $80 game and go, okay, this has to really deliver. It's got to be above and beyond. Sure. And I understand, because you can just wait for a sale. I mean, if you really want it, and yeah, that happens. That tends to happen a lot down the road. But with these game companies and these ballooning budgets, that's all they can really do, other than, well, we can cut back on the budget, maybe tweak some things in development, and the game doesn't meet a certain expectation that has also been going up throughout development and as games have released, right? Or we can do other ways to get money, microtransactions, and we've seen so many experiments run for a long time, even since the PS3 and the 360 generation, when the battle then was on used games. Do you remember the EA Pass, where if you wanted to play online, you had to spend $10 if you bought it used? They got rid of that because I feel like their online lobbies took a nosedive in terms of just overall like population. But those are kind of the experiences that we've seen throughout these generations for these companies trying to figure out ways to make more money as they went along. So how do they get the budgets down? Well, I mean, the one that keeps coming up, and there's a lot of pushback, and you see the fighting back and forth online, is, could AI actually solve a lot of the more tedious or time-consuming tasks to get games out in 3 years? Like, I think if studios can get game development down to 3 years, we may be on to something then. And I do look at a few examples more recently that I think there's studios that I think are starting to figure it out. Capcom is one, and I don't even think I really need to explain it much. They were in some dire straits back in 2016. Monster Hunter World comes out, I think turns things around for them. They put a big focus on their own internal engine with RE Engine. That means that the pipeline for development internally has been a bit more conjoined now, to where people from different teams can help out for games that maybe need it. And it seems like the workflow, just from the outside looking in, the proof with the releases over and over again, and they're pretty high quality. I mean, it's all there. It seems like they've figured out how to get games out without taking 7 or 8 years to make it, right? I think Square Enix is kind of starting to figure it out some. Like, I look at Final Fantasy VII, the remake trilogy. I think it's a perfect example of what we would need to see more of here with many of these different companies, to where they get 7 remake out in 2020. 4 years later, Rebirth comes out. It's a much larger game. Obviously, they reused assets, animations. They've already had the lore kind of built out, but they changed a lot. Reimagined, it's like a whole different game at this point. And now here comes Revelation 3 years after that one. So from the time Remake came out and started the trilogy, they got 2 more games out that would be in the AAA space in the span of actually just under 7 years. I think when you start getting back on that cadence, you're going to at least have a better shot at it. Now, I say a better shot because the unfortunate reality here, the harsh truth, is that just by the sheer definition of AAA gaming and the risk that's associated with it, there's going to be only so many winners. There aren't many games that come out that we may look at and like, this is a great game, more people should play it, and then not enough people buy it and the studio closes. And that's just kind of the reality, because more games than ever are coming out. And it's interesting because with Tim Sweeney pitching the idea of a metaverse with Fortnite and Unreal Engine 6 being what they should be doing and what they should be focusing on, and all I can assume is, hey, we'll pile everybody into, say, Fortnite, and it'll give people these experiences that they can tap into that they wouldn't otherwise. But then you're also, I assume, kind of giving up. Like, are you going to go into Fortnite and buy a game for $60? Is that a thing? I feel like it's not. I feel like people who tap into Fortnite are jumping in because they want to hang out with their friends and play a battle royale. Like, a lot of it is social. They jump in and they're like, hey, let's just jump on. We'll hang out. We'll chat for a bit. We'll see if we can get a victory royale or something. And then after an hour or two, we'll sign off and say goodbye. And I think that's just how kids have been coming up, of course, throughout middle school and high school with, for me back, it was Halo 2. That online experience was crazy. I have to imagine that for many kids now who went through high school and look back on Fortnite with that nostalgic time, that was their social game at night. They jump on after school and homework and everything and do a few rounds and have a good time with their friends. But the funny thing is, I look at Fortnite, and you could say that is actually a problem for gaming at this point. And you could say a lot of the forever games are the live service titles, because we've had enough stats going around that shows that, yeah, they do also suck up a lot of the money that otherwise a decade or two ago would have gone to these AAA games that have only gotten more expensive since before Fortnite was around. 50% of PlayStation Store's revenue that they bring in every year, according to their own reports with Sony, goes to these live service forever games, which means 50% are left for not only Sony's first-party games that they're trying to sell, but a lot of these third-party AAA games. The overall pie, before it even gets to the AAA gaming space, the premium AAA gaming, is cut in half right away. But one thing's for sure, the current trajectory that AAA gaming is on is just unsustainable. Budget's going up, but revenue coming in not going up as fast, so that these companies are profitable, because at the end of the day, it's a business and that's what they exist to do, means that you're going to have some issues in the future, which we're already seeing now. And that comes in forms of layoffs, studio closures, cancellations for games. And one of the things that I think is kind of frustrating, a lot of these companies just playing it safe, being very risk off. And that's a shame, because I do think some of the more risky ventures, especially back, you could say, during the PS2 and then the Xbox 360 era, is how we got a lot of the big name franchises that we're still enjoying to this day. And that just seems like something that'll be few and far between if budgets really are 300, 400, 500 million dollars more frequently. But let me know what you guys think about this one down below. I saw what was being said here, and I went, that sounds like the metaverse. I wonder if that's something that people actually want out of Fortnite in the future. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.